The cement truck's engine roared to life at 6 a.m., its massive barrel rotating as gallons of liquid concrete poured into what had been Sarah's pristine swimming pool just hours before. Margaret Whitmore stood at her kitchen window, arms crossed, watching with cold satisfaction as her neighbor's dream became a $50,000 nightmare. She thought she'd won. She thought her HOA president powers made her untouchable. But what Margaret didn't know was that Sarah Chen had security cameras recording everything and a lawyer for a sister who specialized in property destruction cases. By sunset, Margaret's perfect life would begin crumbling faster than the concrete setting in Sarah's backyard. The morning sun cast long shadows across Willowbrook Estates as Sarah Chen knelt beside her newly installed pool, running her fingers through the crystal clear water. 3 months of permits, contractors, and careful planning had finally paid off. The infinity edge caught the light perfectly, creating ripples that danced across the travertine decking she'd saved 2 years to afford. Beautiful work, isn't it? Sarah looked up to find Margaret Whitmore standing at the property line, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the morning breeze. The HOA president wore her usual uniform, pressed white blouse, navy slacks, and an expression that suggested she'd found something deeply offensive. "Thank you," Sarah replied, rising to her feet. "The kids have been asking when they can have their friends over for a pool party." Margaret's smile never reached her eyes. "Well, that's actually why I'm here. I've been reviewing the architectural guidelines and I'm afraid there might be some issues." Sarah's stomach dropped. "Issues?" "I submitted all the paperwork. The Architectural Review Committee approved everything 3 months ago." "Yes, but..." "You see, the approval was conditional." Margaret pulled out a thick folder, pages flagged with colorful sticky notes. "The pool decking extends 18 inches beyond the approved boundary. The pump house isn't the specified beige color, it's more of a tan. And the pool lights..." She clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "They are not on the approved fixtures list." "Margaret, those are minor details. The contractor assured me everything met HOA standards." "Standards are standards, Sarah. As president, I can't show favoritism just because we're neighbors." Margaret's voice carried the practiced authority of someone who'd spent years wielding small power over others. "I'm afraid you'll need to bring everything into compliance before the next board meeting." Sarah felt her chest tighten. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Adjust the decking, repaint the pump house, and replace the light fixtures. Should only take a few weeks." Margaret's tone suggested she was being generous. "Oh, and there's a fine structure for non-compliance. $200 per day until corrections are made." $200 per day. Sarah's voice cracked. "Margaret, I'm a single mother. I work 2 jobs to afford this place. I can't. I understand it's difficult, but rules apply to everyone equally." Margaret turned to leave, then paused. "You know, if you'd consulted me before starting construction, we could have avoided this unfortunate situation." As Margaret walked away, Sarah stared at the pool that had been her pride and joy minutes earlier. Now it felt like a trap. Later that afternoon, Sarah sat in her kitchen, phone pressed to her ear as she spoke to her sister in Portland. "She can't do this, can she?" Sarah asked, scrolling through the HOA documents on her laptop. "Let me get this straight," Amy Chen Rodriguez said, her voice carrying the sharp edge of a lawyer who'd heard one too many property disputes. "Your neighbor, who happens to be HOA president, is claiming violations on items that were already approved. She says the approval was conditional." "But Amy, I never saw any conditions in the paperwork." "Email me everything. The original application, the approval letter, all correspondence. I'll review it tonight." Sarah heard her 7-year-old daughter Emma's voice in the background. "Mommy, can we swim tomorrow?" "I don't know, sweetheart." Sarah watched through the window as Margaret's husband Bob trimmed their hedge with military precision. "We might have some problems with the pool." "What kind of problems?" "Adult problems. Go play with your brother." Amy's voice returned. "Sarah, I need you to document everything. Take photos of the pool area, the pump house, the lighting. Get statements from the contractor about what was approved. And whatever you do, don't let them intimidate you into doing anything hasty." It's not intimidation, Amy. It's the HOA. They have rules. Rules can be challenged. Trust me. That evening, Sarah knocked on the door of Tom Morrison, the contractor. Who'd built the pool? He answered with flour-dusted hands and the smell of dinner cooking behind him. Sarah. How's the pool treating you? That's what I need to talk about. Margaret Whitmore is claiming violations on the work you did. Tom's expression darkened. What kind of violations? She says the decking extends beyond the approved boundary, the pump house color is wrong, and the lights aren't approved fixtures. That's ridiculous. Tom stepped onto his porch, closing the door behind him. I've been building pools in this neighborhood for 8 years. I know those guidelines by heart. Everything we installed was standard approved materials. She's demanding changes and threatening daily fines. Tom shook his head. Sarah, I've tangled with Margaret before. She pulled similar stunts with the Henderson's fence and the Patel's driveway. She uses her position to harass people she doesn't like. Why wouldn't she like me? You're asking the wrong question. Margaret doesn't like anyone who doesn't kowtow to her authority. She's been trying to get elected to the county zoning board for years, and she treats this HOA like her personal kingdom. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. So what do I do? Fight back. But be smart about it. Margaret's made enemies on this block. Mrs. Patterson still won't speak to her after that business with the garden gnomes. And Dave Kowalski nearly punched her husband last month over the mailbox color. I can't afford a legal battle. Who said anything about lawyers? Sometimes the best way to deal with a bully is to show them they picked the wrong target. The next morning, Sarah found a certified letter in her mailbox. The official HOA letterhead made her hands shake as she read, Notice of Violation, Final WARNING Property, 1247, Maple Ridge Drive Owner, Sarah Chen. You are hereby notified that the following violations exist on your property. 1. Pool decking extends beyond approved specifications. 2. Pump house painted in non-approved color. 3. Lighting fixtures not on approved vendor list. 4. Failure to maintain approved landscaping standards. You have 48 hours to begin remediation or face immediate legal action and daily fines of $200. Failure to comply will result in liens against your property and possible foreclosure proceedings. Margaret Whitmore, HOA President. Sarah read the letter 3 times, each reading making her angrier. The failure to maintain approved landscaping standards was new and completely fabricated. Her yard was immaculate. She called Amy immediately. They can't do this, Amy said after Sarah read the letter aloud. 48 hours isn't reasonable notice for major construction changes. And threatening foreclosure over cosmetic issues. That's harassment. She's escalating because she knows I can't afford to fight. Sarah, listen to me carefully. Don't touch anything yet. I'm driving down tomorrow. In the meantime, I want you to install security cameras around the pool area. Security cameras. Trust me. People like Margaret don't just use official channels. They get creative. That afternoon, Sarah drove to the electronics store and bought 2 wireless security cameras. She installed them herself, positioning one to cover the pool area and another focused on the property line between her house and Margaret's. As she adjusted the camera angle, she noticed Margaret watching from her kitchen window. Their eyes met for a moment before Margaret stepped away from the glass. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Some people don't know when to quit. Mistakes happen to stubborn neighbors. She screenshot the message and sent it to Amy. Friday morning arrived with unseasonable heat. Sarah had taken the day off work to meet with Amy, who'd driven down from Portland overnight. They sat in Sarah's kitchen, legal documents spread across the table like battle plans. This is a slam dunk, Amy said, adjusting her reading glasses. The original approval letter contains no conditions. Margaret's manufacturing violations that don't exist. So what's our next move? We file a formal complaint with the state HOA Oversight Board. We also send a cease and desist letter demanding they stop the harassment. If they continue, we sue for damages. Sarah felt a weight lifting from her chest. How long will this take? couple weeks for the complaint to be processed. The cease and desist should buy us time. A loud rumbling sound interrupted their conversation. Sarah looked out the window to see a massive cement truck turning into their cul-de-sac. That's odd, Sarah said. Nobody's doing construction work today. Amy joined her at the window. The truck was approaching Sarah's house, its massive barrel rotating slowly. Sarah, did you order any concrete work? No, of course not. The truck stopped in front of Sarah's house. The driver got out, consulted a clipboard, and began unrolling a thick hose toward the backyard. Stop. Sarah ran outside, Amy close behind. What are you doing? The driver, a middle-aged man with concrete dust on his clothes, looked confused. I've got a work order. The pre-dawn darkness of Saturday morning was shattered by the rumble of heavy machinery. Sarah jolted awake to the sound of hydraulic systems and diesel engines, her heart hammering as she realized the noise was coming from her backyard. She threw on a robe and raced outside, Amy stumbling behind her in pajamas and bare feet. What they found made Sarah's blood run cold. A cement truck, different from yesterday's, was already positioned at the edge of her property. Two men in reflective vests were feeding a massive hose toward her pool, while a third operated a small excavator that had somehow appeared overnight. Stop! Sarah screamed, running toward them. You can't do this. The nearest worker, a burly man with tattoos covering his forearms, barely looked up. Lady, we've got a legal work order. Emergency safety violation needs immediate remediation. It's not legal. Amy shouted, her lawyer voice cutting through the engine noise. You're destroying private property. The man pulled out a laminated document. Says here the pool's a safety hazard. HOA president authorized emergency action. We're just doing our job. Sarah grabbed the paper. Unlike yesterday's crude forgery, this document looked official, complete. With County Safety Department letterhead and what appeared to be a legitimate emergency authorization signature. This is fake, Sarah said, but her voice wavered. The document looked remarkably authentic. Take it up with the county, the man replied, signaling to his crew. We start pouring in 5 minutes. Amy was already on her phone, calling the police. Yes, this is an emergency. Someone is destroying my sister's property right now. 1247, Maple Ridge Drive. While Amy spoke to the dispatcher, Sarah noticed something that made her stomach drop. Margaret's house showed no signs of life, no lights. No movement, no cars in the driveway. For someone who'd supposedly authorized emergency action, Margaret was remarkably absent. The concrete began to flow. No. Sarah lunged toward the hose, but the tattooed worker blocked her path. Lady, you interfere with this operation and we'll have you arrested. This is legal county business. Sarah watched in horror as the first grey sludge hit the crystal clear water of her pool. The sound was obscene, like watching someone pour cement into a grave. The police are on their way. Amy announced, but her voice carried defeat. The damage was already being done. Within minutes, the shallow end of the pool was filling with concrete. Sarah's infinity edge, her perfect travertine deck, her carefully planned lighting, all of it disappearing under an unstoppable grey tide. The police arrived 20 minutes later, by which time the pool was half full. Officer Martinez, a middle-aged Hispanic man with kind eyes, surveyed the scene with professional detachment. I understand you believe this is unauthorized. It's not unauthorized, Amy said, showing him the work order. It's fraudulent. This document is forged. Officer Martinez examined the paperwork. It looks official to me. County Safety Department seal, proper authorization codes. If you believe it's fraudulent, you'll need to take it up with the county on Monday. By Monday, her pool will be completely destroyed. I'm sorry, Without proof of fraud, I can't stop legally authorized work. Sarah felt the world tilting around her. Officer, this is my property. These men are destroying something that cost me $50,000 based on a fake document. Like I said, if the document is fake, the county will sort it out. But I can't determine authenticity in the field. As Officer Martinez Left, Sarah turned to see Margaret's car pulling into her driveway. The HOA president emerged wearing yoga clothes and carrying a Starbucks cup, looking for all the world like someone returning from an innocent morning workout. "Oh my," Margaret called out, feigning surprise. "What's happening here?" "You know exactly what's happening," Sarah snarled. "You forged that work order." Margaret's expression shifted to wounded innocence. "Sarah, I would never do such a thing. If the county determined your pool was a safety hazard, that's between you and them. The county didn't determine anything. You fabricated this whole thing." "I think you're overwrought," Margaret said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Perhaps you should go inside and let the professionals handle this." Amy stepped forward. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm documenting everything. Every conversation, every forged document, every illegal action. When we prove fraud, you'll be personally liable for the full cost of replacement." Margaret's smile never wavered. "Good luck with that, dear. I'm sure your sister mentioned I have connections at the county level. Emergency safety procedures exist for a reason." As Margaret walked toward her house, Sarah noticed something that made her pulse quicken. The security camera she'd installed was recording everything, including Margaret's performance of innocence despite having been conveniently absent during the actual destruction. The concrete truck finished its work by noon. Sarah's pool, her dream, her investment, her children's joy, was now a solid block of grey cement. The contractors cleaned up their equipment and left, taking their fraudulent work order with them. Sarah sat on her deck, staring at the concrete monument to Margaret's malice. Amy paced behind her, phone pressed to her ear as she spoke to various county officers, trying to find someone who would admit to authorizing the emergency action. The County Safety Department has no record of any emergency authorization, Amy finally reported. The document is definitely forged. Can we prove Margaret did it? We can prove she's the only person who benefited from it. And we've got her on camera pretending to be surprised by something she clearly orchestrated. Sarah's phone buzzed. With a text from Tom Morrison, her contractor, saw the concrete trucks this morning. "I'm so sorry. This is beyond anything I've ever seen." Another text followed immediately. "Margaret's been calling every contractor in the county, threatening them with lawsuits if they work on your property. She's systematically cutting off your options." Sarah showed the messages to Amy. "She's been planning this for days. The cease and desist letters, the threats, the forged work order, it's all coordinated. Which means she's left a trail of evidence. People like Margaret get sloppy when they think they are untouchable." That evening, Sarah's doorbell rang. She opened it to find Dave Kowalski, her neighbor from 3 houses down, holding a manila envelope. "I wasn't going to get involved," Dave said, his voice tight with anger. "But what she did to your pool, it's too much." "What do you mean?" Dave handed her the envelope. "Margaret's been planning this for weeks. She's been trying to rally other neighbors against you, claiming you're lowering property values with your ostentatious display of wealth." Sarah opened the envelope to find printed emails, dozens of them, all from Margaret's account to various neighbors. "She sent these to everyone on the block," Dave continued. "Most people ignored them, but Mrs. Patterson kept copies. She gave them to me after she saw the concrete trucks." Sarah scanned the emails, her anger building with each message. "The Chen woman thinks she's better than the rest of us with her fancy pool. We need to show her that Willowbrook Estates has standards. I found several code violations on the Chen property. We can force compliance if we present a united front. The pool is just the beginning. Once we establish precedent, we can enforce proper community standards throughout the neighborhood." "She's been planning this campaign for a month," Amy said, reading over Sarah's shoulder. "This is premeditated harassment." Dave nodded grimly. "There's more. She's been telling people you're some kind of troublemaker who doesn't respect community values. She even claimed you threatened her." "I never threatened her." "I know that. Most of us know that. But Margaret's good at twisting things. She's been building a case against you in people's minds." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "What kind of case?" "The kind that would justify extreme measures. She's been telling people you're dangerous, that you need to be driven out of the neighborhood for everyone's safety. Amy's lawyer instincts kicked in. This is evidence of conspiracy. She's been documenting her own criminal intent. There's something else, Dave said reluctantly. Margaret's husband Bob isn't comfortable with what she's doing. He's been asking questions around the neighborhood, trying to gauge support for his wife's campaign. I think he's having second thoughts. What kind of questions? Whether people really want to see you gone. Whether they support the HOA taking aggressive action. From what I heard, most people told him to leave you alone. Sarah felt a spark of hope. So the neighborhood isn't against me? Hell no. Most of us think Margaret's lost her mind. But we are all afraid of becoming her next target. Later that night, Sarah sat in her living room with Amy, planning their next move. The printed emails were spread across the coffee table. Like evidence at a crime scene. We file criminal charges Monday morning, Amy said. Fraud, conspiracy, destruction of property. The forged work order alone is a felony. Will it stick? With this evidence? Absolutely. She's documented her own criminal intent in writing. Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed Margaret's name. Don't answer it, Amy advised, but Sarah was already picking up. Sarah, we need to talk. Margaret's voice was different, less controlled, more desperate. We have nothing to talk about. I think we do. I'm prepared to make this right. Sarah looked at Amy, who was frantically gesturing for her to keep. Monday morning arrived with the promise of justice. Sarah sat in Detective Ray Holbrook's office at 9 a.m. sharp, watching him review the mountain of evidence Amy had compiled over the weekend. The detective, a weathered man in his 50s with intelligent eyes, methodically examined each document, email, and recorded conversation. Mrs. Chen, I've been investigating fraud cases for 20 years, and I've rarely seen documentation this comprehensive. He held up the printed emails. Your neighbor essentially created a paper trail of her own criminal conspiracy. Amy leaned forward. What charges are we looking at? Fraud in the first degree for the forged work order. Criminal mischief for the property destruction. Harassment for the systematic campaign. And if we can prove she filed false reports with social services and immigration. He paused, consulting his notes. We are talking federal charges. This could be a career-ending case for someone. Sarah felt a mixture of satisfaction and unease. How long will this take? We'll execute a search warrant this afternoon. With this evidence, we should have enough for an arrest by evening. As they left the police station, Sarah noticed Amy checking her phone obsessively. What's wrong? I keep expecting Margaret to try something desperate. People like her don't just accept defeat quietly. They were walking to their car when Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed Emma's school. Mrs. Chen. This is Principal Martinez at Willowbrook Elementary. We need you to come in immediately. There's been an incident involving Emma. Sarah's blood ran cold. What kind of incident? Someone called in a report claiming Emma had been abused. Child Protective Services is here and they want to speak with you. Sarah's hands shook as she ended the call. Margaret called CPS to Emma's school. They are investigating me for child abuse. Amy grabbed Sarah's arm. We are going to the school right now. This is harassment and we can prove it. They arrived at Willowbrook Elementary to find Emma sitting in the nurse's office, confused and frightened. A stern-looking woman in a grey suit introduced herself as Janet Morrison from Child Protective Services. Mrs. Chen, we received a report that your daughter came to school with suspicious injuries. The caller claimed the child had been physically disciplined inappropriately. Sarah knelt beside Emma, examining her arms and legs. What injuries? Emma, are you hurt? I scraped my knee on my bike yesterday, Emma said, pointing to a small bandage. Mrs. Whitmore saw me fall and asked if Mommy hit me. I said no, but she kept asking weird questions. Janet Morrison's expression shifted. Mrs. Whitmore was the caller. She claimed to have witnessed physical abuse. Amy stepped forward. Ms. Morrison, we are in the process of filing criminal charges against Margaret Whitmore for harassment and fraud. This false report is part of a documented campaign of intimidation. You have documentation? Amy handed her a folder. Emails, recorded conversations and witness statements showing Mrs. Whitmore's systematic harassment of my client. This false CPS report is just the latest escalation. Janet Morrison reviewed the documents, her frown deepening. Mrs. Chen, I'm required to investigate all reports, but given this evidence, I'm confident we can close this case quickly. I'll be filing my own report about the false allegation. As they left the school, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Tom Morrison, Margaret's at your house. She's got some kind of equipment. I called police. She's at my house, Sarah told Amy as they raced toward the car. With equipment. They drove through the neighborhood with Amy on the phone to Detective Holbrook. We need units at 1247 Maple Ridge Drive immediately. The suspect is on the property. When they turned onto their street, Sarah saw Margaret's car in her driveway and something that made her heart stop. Margaret was standing by the pool with a jackhammer, already breaking chunks of concrete from the surface. She's destroying the evidence, Sarah breathed. They pulled up as two police cars arrived from the opposite direction. Margaret looked up from the jackhammer, her face flushed with exertion and desperation. Margaret Whitmore, step away from the equipment, Detective Holbrook commanded through a megaphone. Margaret shut off the jackhammer and straightened up. I'm just helping my neighbor clean up this mess. The concrete wasn't properly mixed, it's a safety hazard. You're on private property without permission, and you're destroying evidence in a criminal investigation. Evidence of what? I'm trying to fix a mistake. Detective Holbrook approached with two officers flanking him. Mrs. Whitmore, you're under arrest for criminal mischief, fraud, and harassment. You have the right to remain silent. As the handcuffs clicked around Margaret's wrists, she looked directly at Sarah. You think this is over? You have no idea what I'm capable of. Actually, I think we are getting a pretty good idea, Amy replied. That afternoon, Sarah sat in her living room, watching the crime scene investigators photograph and document every chunk of concrete Margaret had broken. The jackhammer attack had actually helped their case, it proved consciousness of guilt and provided additional evidence of property destruction. Detective Holbrook knocked on the door around 4 p.m. Mrs. Chen, I wanted to update you on the investigation. We executed the search warrant on the Whitmore residence. What did you find? Everything. She kept detailed files on you, photos of your house, copies of your employment records, notes about your daily routines. She's been stalking you for months. Sarah felt a chill. Stalking. She had a calendar marking your work schedule, your children's activities, when you were home alone. She knew your patterns better than you did. Amy joined them from the kitchen. What about the forged documents? We found the template files on her computer, along with research into county emergency procedures. She even practiced forging the safety inspector's signature. This wasn't impulse, it was a carefully planned operation. How long could she go to prison? With the charges we are filing, 8 to 12 years. The federal charges for filing false reports could add another 5. Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed Bob Whitmore's name. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I just heard about the arrest. I had no idea she was at your house today. Where are you? Bob? At my mother's house. I moved out last night. I couldn't watch her destroy herself anymore. The police found surveillance files on me. How long has she been doing this? Bob's voice cracked. Since the day you moved in. She started keeping files on all the new neighbors, but you became an obsession. She said you were disrupting the community balance. What does that even mean? It means she couldn't control you. Margaret needs to control everything in her environment. When you stood up to her, she saw it as a threat to her entire identity. Detective Holbrook gestured for the phone. Mr. Whitmore. This is Detective Holbrook. We need you to come in for a formal statement. I'll be there in an hour. That Evening, Sarah stood in her backyard, surveying the damage. The pool area looked like a war zone, chunks of broken concrete scattered across the deck, jackhammer gouges in the surrounding stone, her beautiful infinity edge destroyed. But for the first time in days, she felt something approaching peace. Margaret was in jail, facing serious charges. The harassment campaign was over. Emma and her son Jake were safe. Amy joined her by the pool. Tom Morrison called. He thinks he can restore everything for about $30,000. The insurance company is already processing the claim. What about Margaret's house? Bob's putting it on the market. He wants to move across the country, start fresh. He's deeply embarrassed by what she did. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text. From an unknown number, this isn't over. You'll pay for what you've done. She's still texting from jail. Amy asked, reading over her shoulder. Different number. Maybe she's using someone else's phone. Amy frowned. Or someone's helping her. The next morning brought disturbing news. Detective Holbrook called at 8 a.m., his voice tense. Mrs. Chen, we have a problem. Margaret Whitmore made bail last night. Sarah's stomach dropped. How is that possible? Her attorney argued that she's not a flight risk because of community ties. The judge set bail at $50,000. Someone posted it. Who? We are still investigating. But I need you to be extra careful. She's required to stay away from your property, but given her escalating behavior, I'm not confident she'll comply. Sarah looked out her kitchen window at the empty Whitmore house. She's not there. Where is she? We don't know. She's supposed to report to a bail supervision officer, but she missed her appointment this morning. Amy grabbed the phone. Are you saying she skipped bail? I'm saying we can't locate her. We've issued a warrant for her arrest. Tuesday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Sarah opened her door to find Patricia Patterson standing on her porch, looking frail and worried. Mrs. Chen, I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to warn you about Margaret. Please, come in. Patricia sat heavily on the couch. I posted her bail. I know it was foolish, but she's still my daughter. I thought if I could get her out, maybe I could talk sense into her. What happened? She's completely lost touch with reality. She blames you for everything, her arrest, Bob leaving, the neighbors turning against her. She's convinced you're part of some conspiracy to destroy her. Sarah felt cold dread in her stomach. Where is she now? I don't know. She left my house this morning and hasn't come back. But 3 weeks after the fire, Sarah stood in her rebuilt pool house, watching contractors put the finishing touches on the new structure. The insurance settlement had been generous, enough to restore everything Margaret had destroyed and upgrade the security system. But the real victory was quieter. Margaret Whitmore sat in county jail awaiting trial on 14 felony charges. The new pool should be finished next week, Tom Morrison said, consulting his tablet. I've never seen an insurance company move this fast, but then again, I've never seen a case with this much documentation. Sarah nodded, watching her security monitors display clear views of every inch of her property. Has there been any word from the lawyers about Margaret's plea negotiations? Amy looked up from her phone. Her attorney called this morning. They want to discuss a plea deal. What kind of deal? Guilty plea to all charges in exchange for 8 years instead of the potential 15. She'd also have to pay full restitution for all damage. Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions. Justice, but also sadness for how completely Margaret had destroyed her own life. What do you think? I think 8 years is appropriate. She'll lose her house, her reputation, her freedom. Bob's divorce will be final by then. She'll have nothing left of her old life. Good, Sarah said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. Maybe 8 years will be enough time for her to understand what she did. Amy's phone rang. She answered with her usual lawyer efficiency, but her expression quickly shifted to concern. When did this happen? Are you sure? She hung up and turned to Sarah with a grim expression. That was Detective Holbrook. Margaret's attorney just withdrew from her case. Why would he do that? Because Margaret fired him. She's representing herself now, and she's rejecting the plea deal. She wants to go to trial. Sarah felt a chill. What does that mean? It means she thinks she can win. Or it means she's planning something we haven't anticipated. The first sign of Margaret's new strategy came that afternoon when Sarah's doorbell rang. She opened it to find a young woman with a press badge and a camera crew behind her. Mrs. Chen. I'm Jessica Wu from Channel 7 News. We'd like to interview you about the harassment case that's divided your neighborhood. Divided the neighborhood? We've been speaking with residents who support Margaret Whitmore. They claim you've been portraying her unfairly, that this is really a story about newcomers disrupting established communities. Sarah stared at the reporter. What residents? Several neighbors who wished to remain anonymous. They described Mrs. Whitmore as a dedicated community leader who was trying to enforce reasonable standards when you launched a vindictive campaign against her. Amy appeared at Sarah's shoulder. I'm Mrs. Chen's attorney. This interview is over. Mrs. Rodriguez, isn't it true that your sister filed false police reports and manipulated evidence to frame an innocent woman? Amy stepped forward. It's Dr. Chen Rodriguez, and if you broadcast any defamatory statements, you'll be hearing from our legal team. As the news crew left, Sarah turned to Amy in bewilderment. Where is this coming from? Margaret's representing herself, which means she's free to contact media directly. She's trying to control the narrative. That evening, Sarah watched in horror as Channel 7's news broadcast painted her as an aggressive newcomer who had destroyed a respected community leader's life over minor HOA disputes. The story featured carefully edited interviews with anonymous neighbors who described Margaret as fair-minded and Sarah as vengeful. How can they broadcast lies like this? Sarah asked. Because Margaret's smart enough to make claims that can't be easily disproven, Amy replied. Anonymous sources, vague accusations, just enough truth mixed with fiction to create doubt. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, enjoying the news coverage. This is just the beginning. She's still threatening me from jail. Amy examined the message. Different phone number again. She's either using other inmates' phones or someone's helping her. The next morning brought a new nightmare. Sarah arrived at her office to find her boss, Linda Martinez, waiting with a concerned expression. Sarah, we need to talk. I've been getting calls about your illegal situation. What kind of calls? Someone claiming to be a concerned citizen. Saying you've been filing false police reports and harassing your neighbors. They suggested the company should investigate whether you are fit to handle client accounts. Sarah felt the world tilting. Linda, you know me. You know I would never. I do know you, which is why I'm warning you instead of starting an investigation. But Sarah, these calls are detailed. They know about your work schedule, your clients, even your performance reviews. Someone's been studying your employment file. It's Margaret Whitmore. She's been conducting a campaign of harassment from jail. Can you prove that? Sarah realized with growing dread that she couldn't. Margaret was using untraceable phones and anonymous tips, staying just within the bounds of legal manipulation while destroying Sarah's reputation. The campaign against Sarah escalated throughout the week. Emma's school received calls claiming Sarah was neglecting her children. Sarah's second job got reports that she was stealing from clients. Her car insurance company was told she'd been driving while intoxicated. Each report was investigated and dismissed, but the cumulative effect was exhausting. Sarah spent more time defending herself than living her life. She's brilliant, Amy admitted grudgingly as they sat in Sarah's kitchen. Friday evening. She's creating chaos without technically breaking any laws. Everything looks like concerned citizen reports. How is she coordinating all this from jail? I've been thinking about that. Remember how Bob said she kept files on everyone in the neighborhood? What if she recruited helpers before her arrest? Sarah's doorbell rang. Through the window, she could see Dave Kowalski standing on her porch, looking agitated. Dave, what's wrong? Sarah, I need to tell you something. About Margaret's support network. They invited him in, and Dave sat heavily on the couch. I've been getting calls all week from someone claiming to represent Margaret. They are offering money for information about you. What kind of information? Your work schedule, your dating life, whether you drink, whether you discipline your kids. They want dirt they can use to discredit you. Amy leaned forward. Who's making these calls? That's what's weird. It's always a different person, but they all have the same talking points. Like they're reading from a script. Sarah felt cold realization dawning. She's built a network. Before her arrest, she was recruiting people to continue her campaign. There's more, Dave continued. They are not just targeting you. They are approaching other neighbors, trying to get them to sign a petition supporting Margaret's defense. A petition? Claiming she's the victim of a malicious prosecution. That you manipulated evidence and turned the neighborhood against an innocent woman. Amy's phone rang. She answered with growing concern, then hung up and turned to Sarah with a grave expression. That was Detective Holbrook. Margaret's trial date has been moved up. Her new strategy is working. She's convinced the judge that she's the victim of a rush to judgment. Saturday morning brought the most disturbing development yet. Sarah was making breakfast when she noticed a car parked across the street with someone inside taking pictures of her house. When she went outside to confront the photographer, the car sped away. An hour later, Amy called with urgent news. Sarah, Margaret's defense team just filed a motion claiming you've been stalking and harassing her family members. That's insane. I haven't contacted anyone in her family. They have photos of you conducting surveillance of Margaret's supporters. The pictures were taken this morning. Sarah realized with growing horror what had happened. Someone was watching my house, taking pictures to make it look like I was the one doing surveillance. It's sophisticated. They are creating evidence of your alleged harassment while conducting actual surveillance themselves. How deep does this go? I'm starting to think Margaret spent months preparing for this possibility. She may have been planning her defense strategy before she ever filled your pool with concrete. That afternoon, Sarah received a call from Patricia Patterson, Margaret's mother. The elderly woman's voice was shaky with distress. Sarah, I need to apologize. And I need to warn you. What's happened? Margaret's been calling me from jail, demanding I change my testimony. She says if I don't support her version of events, she'll claim I helped plan the pool destruction. Did you help plan it? Of course not. But she's threatening to say I provided inside information about county procedures with criminal intent rather than innocent curiosity. Sarah felt the web of manipulation expanding. She's trying to turn you into a co-conspirator. She's threatening her own mother to save herself. But there's something else. She's been getting help from someone with serious resources. The calls I'm receiving come from expensive lawyers, not public defenders. Who's paying for expensive lawyers? I don't know, but Margaret mentioned something about old friends who understand the importance of community standards. She's connected with people who see her case as bigger than just a neighbor dispute. Amy grabbed the phone. Mrs. Patterson. This is Amy Chen Rodriguez. What exactly did Margaret say about these old friends? She said there are people in positions. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity on the morning of Margaret Whitmore's trial. Sarah sat in the front row with Amy, watching as reporters filled the gallery and camera crews clustered outside the courthouse. What had started as a neighbor dispute had become a national spectacle. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Alvarez, the bailiff announced. Judge Alvarez, a stern woman in her 60s with silver hair and intelligent eyes, surveyed the packed courtroom with obvious displeasure. Before we begin, I want to make something clear. This trial is about specific criminal charges, not community values or cultural politics. I will not tolerate any disruptions. Margaret sat at the defendant's table, representing herself as promised. She wore a conservative navy suit and had styled her hair to look softer, more sympathetic. But Sarah could see the calculation in her eyes as she scanned the crowd of supporters behind her. District Attorney Michael Torres stood to deliver his opening statement. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about what happens when someone with a small amount of power decides that power makes them above the law. He clicked a remote, and the courtroom screens displayed photos of Sarah's pool filled with concrete. Margaret Whitmore didn't just fill a pool with cement. She forged government documents, conducted a systematic campaign of harassment, filed false reports with multiple agencies, and ultimately committed arson when her other crimes were discovered. The prosecutor methodically laid out the evidence: the forged work orders, the recorded phone conversations, the emails documenting premeditation, the surveillance files found on Margaret's computer. This isn't about HOA rules or community standards, Torres continued. This is about a woman who believed she was entitled to destroy her neighbor's life simply because that neighbor refused to be intimidated. When it was Margaret's turn, she rose with the confidence of someone who genuinely believed she was the victim. Members of the jury, my name is Margaret Whitmore, and for 15 years I served this community as an HOA president. I dedicated my life to maintaining the standards that make Willowbrook Estates a place where families can thrive. She gestured toward Sarah. When Sarah Chen moved into our neighborhood, she immediately began violating those standards. Not small violations, major construction that threatened our property values and community character. Margaret's voice carried the practiced authority Sarah remembered from their first encounter. When I tried to address these violations through proper channels, Mrs. Chen responded with hostility and legal threats. She turned what should have been a simple compliance matter into a vindictive campaign to destroy my reputation and my life. Sarah watched in amazement as Margaret reframed every criminal act as defensive response to Sarah's aggression. The forged work order became emergency action to protect community safety. The harassment campaign became legitimate efforts to document ongoing violations. Even the arson was portrayed as desperate attempt to prevent further escalation. I'm not the criminal here, Margaret concluded. I am the victim of a systematic effort to silence community leaders who dare to enforce standards. Mrs. Chen wants to transform this neighborhood into something it was never meant to be, and when I stood in her way, she used her resources and connections to criminalize legitimate community governance. The first day of testimony established the timeline of events. Detective Holbrook presented the evidence methodically: Margaret's computer files showing months of surveillance, the forged county documents, the phone recordings where Margaret admitted responsibility and attempted bribery. Detective, in your experience, have you ever seen this level of premeditation in a neighbor dispute? DA Torres asked. Never. Mrs. Whitmore created detailed files on Mrs. Chen that would be impressive in a professional investigation. This wasn't emotional reaction, this was systematic stalking. When Margaret cross-examined, she focused on challenging the legality of the search warrants and suggesting that Sarah had manipulated evidence. But her lack of legal training showed as she repeatedly violated courtroom procedure and earned sharp rebukes from Judge Alvarez. The second day brought Sarah's testimony. She walked through the timeline clearly and calmly, from the first HOA violations to the final arson attack. When Margaret attempted to cross-examine her, the true nature of her obsession became clear. Mrs. Chen, isn't it true that you deliberately chose materials and designs that violated our community standards? No, everything was pre-approved by the architectural committee. But you knew those approvals were conditional, didn't you? There were no conditions mentioned in any of the paperwork. Mrs. Chen, isn't it true that you targeted me personally because I represented traditional community values that threatened your agenda? Amy stood to object, but Sarah answered first. Margaret, I just wanted to swim in my pool with my children. I never had an agenda beyond that. Margaret's facade cracked slightly. You destroyed my marriage, my reputation, my entire life over a few minor HOA violations. I didn't destroy anything. You chose to forge documents, file false reports, and commit arson. Those were your choices. I was protecting my community. Judge Alvarez slammed her gavel. Ms. Whitmore, you will confine yourself to questions, not speeches. But the damage was done. The jury had seen Margaret's obsession firsthand, her inability to accept responsibility for her actions. The third day brought devastating testimony from Patricia Patterson, Margaret's own mother. The elderly woman took the stand with obvious reluctance, but her testimony was damning. My daughter asked me about county emergency procedures, claiming she wanted to understand them for her HOA duties. I explained how work orders function, what they look like, how they are authorized. Did you know she intended to use this information to commit fraud? DA Torres asked. Of course not. If I had known, I never would have helped her. When Patricia described finding the forged documents on Margaret's computer and realizing her daughter had perverted the information she'd provided, several jurors looked physically ill. Margaret's cross-examination of her own mother was painful to watch. Mom, didn't you think Mrs. Chen was disrupting our neighborhood values? Margaret, I thought you were having a normal neighbor dispute. I never imagined you were capable of criminal behavior. But you understand I was trying to protect our community. Patricia looked at her daughter with sad eyes. I understand. You were destroying yourself, and I was too blind to see it happening. Bob Whitmore's testimony was equally damaging. He described finding Margaret's surveillance files, her obsessive planning, her escalating threats against Sarah's family. She kept detailed schedules of Sarah's movements, photos of her children, notes about her work patterns. It was like she was planning a military operation. Did you try to stop her? I tried to reason with her, but she saw any disagreement as betrayal. By the end, she was convinced that everyone was either with her or against her. When Margaret questioned her estranged husband, her desperation became more obvious. Bob, didn't you agree that Mrs. Chen was violating community standards? I thought the pool looked nice. I never understood why you cared so much. But you supported my authority as HOA president. I supported you until you started breaking the law. Then I realized I didn't know who you were anymore. The fourth day brought expert testimony that demolished Margaret's defense. A handwriting analyst confirmed that Margaret had forged the county safety inspector's signature. A computer forensics expert testified about the detailed surveillance files and the timeline showing premeditation. A psychiatrist explained how Margaret's behavior fit patterns of narcissistic personality disorder and obsessive control. Margaret's attempt to cross-examine the experts revealed her growing desperation. She repeatedly tried to argue that her actions were justified by community needs, but the experts methodically dismantled her claims. The most dramatic moment came when the prosecution played the security camera footage of Margaret's innocent performance the morning of the concrete attack. The jury watched her emerge from her car with coffee and workout clothes, feigning surprise at the destruction she had orchestrated. This is what criminal consciousness of guilt looks like, DA Torres told the jury. She planned the crime, executed it, then performed innocence for the cameras. When Margaret took the stand in her own defense, her testimony was a masterclass in self-destruction. She maintained her victim narrative, but under cross-examination, her obsession with Sarah became undeniable. Mrs. Whitmore, you kept photographs of Mrs. Chen's children in your surveillance files. Why? I was documenting the full scope of the violations. What violations did 7-year-old Emma Chen commit? She was part of the household that was disrupting community standards. You filed false reports claiming Emma was being abused. Why? I believed Mrs. Chen's parenting methods were questionable. Based on what evidence? Based on her general disregard for community rules. The circular logic and obvious obsession horrified the jury. Several jurors visibly recoiled when Margaret claimed that destroying the pool was necessary to protect property values. The trial's climax came when the prosecution revealed Margaret's support network. Detective Holbrook testified about the coordinated harassment campaign that continued even while Margaret